We're going to keep this party going. We got two awesome speakers coming up on stage. You met her before. She's pulling double duty today. She's the CFO of LKP Impact Consulting. Lori Parfit, to the stage, please. Making her first appearance with us today, she's the CEO of the AEJ Group. Her name is Ashley Julian. Round of applause for our next two speakers.
Can you hear me?
Y'all are going to have 40 good minutes. Have fun.
Thank you so much.
You're
Hi,
welcome.
everybody. I'm back. All right. So we are here to talk about personal branding. And so very excited to be back up here. You got a little bit of a preview of what we're going to be talking about because some of you asked questions at my last discussion at 9 a.m. And so I'm a fractional CMO for highly regulated industries, cannabis, psychedelics, sex, alcohol, and then disruptive CPG. And so I help brands, operators, technology, and ancillary services who don't need or can't afford full-time marketing. I provide it at a size and scale that works for them. Ashley, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Ashley Julian. I'm the president and CEO of the AEJ Group. My firm is actually a political consulting firm that helps individual members of Congress with their communications to voters. So I spent 14 years on Capitol Hill originally with Lockheed Martin and then Leidos, and then in 2021 decided to start my own consulting firm, and then now I work with primarily progressive members of Congress to help make sure that voters actually understand what they're doing and how it impacts their day-to-day lives. So very excited for today's discussion, and you're the pro since you've been here since 9 a.m. really running the show.
Awesome. So this is going to be a very casual discussion. This is a fireside chat. It's just going to be the two of us. And so, we'll make this as interactive as we possibly can. And we're going to cover a bunch of different topics today. And then we'll leave some time at the end for sure for questions. So our first topic is we're going to talk about our burnout moments. So both of us run our own companies. And both of us come from corporate America, where we spent many, many years. And so as we discussed this chat, we talked about what was that burnout moment? What made us want to start our own business? Because starting your own business is no walk in the park.
No.
Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, and it's definitely very difficult. So Ashley, why don't you go ahead and tell us what your burnout moment was?
Yeah, I was, let's see, I was doing everything for everyone in my company, even though I was just in charge of sales. I was doing marketing, I was doing training, I was doing product development, I was doing the UI experience for our clients. And I realized that this was all just becoming too much, and that if I was going to be doing everything for everyone, I might as well be doing it for myself. I knew I could do it better than anyone else was doing it in that space. In Congress, it's so weird because there's really a very small amount of like vendors to choose from to work with, and it felt so like stifled by bureaucracy. Ironic, I know, Congress, but I was like, I can do this better and faster and more scalable, because even though Congress as a whole is a very slow moving ship, these different kind of topics will come up, and members need to be able to respond really quickly with concise information that's going to be helpful to voters, help make sure that they get their message across. So I had just really hit my limit, and I decided that I was going to cash out from my previous employer and start my company. I found out I was pregnant 7 weeks into starting my company. So
What was that like?
it was awesome. That's a joke. It was exhausting. It was just growing a company and growing life at the same time. I would be in like pitch meetings. It was still 2021 though, so like you were still virtual, so you couldn't really tell I was pregnant yet. But then I would just like literally do a pitch and then like sleep on the floor in my office. And by office, I mean I moved a desk into my closet during the pandemic, and then that's now AEJ Group headquarters still. But it's been great. I mean, that was a wild ride, and it was just, I feel so humble and fortunate though that so many of my relationships were able to help support me in that journey, because I started out with obviously zero clients just back to the most humbling start of cold calling and, leveraging your network to try to find people that might be interested in what you're bringing to the table. And now we represent almost 25% of the House of Representatives. So we've got almost 150 members of Congress that are clients of ours. So it's definitely been a journey the last 18 months, but I think doing it alongside watching my son grow up is amazing and hilarious all at the same time. It's just chaos. Every day is chaos in our house, in our life. You open the door, our nanny comes in. I'm like, "Welcome to the Thunderdome." There's dogs, there's companies, there's assistants, there's employees, there's it's very authentic to who I am, and we're just rolling with it as best as we can.
That sounds so familiar, my friend.
Yes, the Thunderdome.
All right, so my burnout moment's a little different. So I spent about almost 20 years in corporate America. And I actually started my career in finance, then I moved into sales, operations, and then marketing. And so I never really fit in corporate America. People could identify the fact that I had a good skill set, but nobody knew where to put me. And so if you don't fit into the box in corporate America, it confuses them. Additionally, I'm kind of a maverick. I'm a misfit. I always called myself a corporate misfit. I was a go big or go home, big ideas. I had no issue failing. And when you work in corporate America, they want to always take the safe route. So I struggled with that. And I struggled with companies who would always kind of give me the job because they didn't know what to do with me that nobody else wanted to do. And I would do it really well, but then where was I going next? And so I joined the cannabis space back in 2019 thinking, "Oh my gosh, this is my ticket to the future." And I thought this was where all the money was. This was going to be this amazing industry. And my timing was not so great. So I found my dream job. I got to do exactly what I wanted to do. I got to run my show my way. And then we ended up in a capital markets crisis in early 2020. And they started selling off my dispensaries. And as a result, I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. And so I sat with my husband and I was like, okay, well maybe I'll start doing resumes. And it's 2020, it's COVID, not a lot of people are hiring. And he's like, yeah, you could do that. You could do resumes and cover letters and interviews and thank you notes. Or you could take that skill set and just do business development. I'd already done a little bit of consulting, and he's like, can you imagine what you could do if you tried? And so I was like, I'm probably just going to be sitting here pressing refresh on my inbox because I don't know where I'm going to get clients. And so, but I gave it a try. I was like, you know what? I never liked corporate America. I had a coach who gave me a personality profile. And in that personality profile, it told me that my security score was a 0 out of 100, which meant that I don't like security at all. I don't crave it, and it actually bothers me, which I had no idea that that was part of my personality. And I realized that that was my blockage, was that like I always thought I was going to chase the W-2 income. I always needed to be part of corporate structure. And the second I let go of that, I was able to start my own thing. And so I started my business in 2020, started it kind of slow, and then it started to build. And it really started more in CPG. And then all of a sudden, I was back in the cannabis space. And I got my first cannabis client. I started speaking on behalf of the cannabis industry, and it's all gone from there. And I have never once pressed refresh on my inbox.
I love that for you. I could get rid of my inbox right now. In fact, I'd be
Yeah,
happy
no, me
to.
too. Sometimes I wish it would just turn off.
But I think that's so incredible, though, to share, that perspective, and also being able, I think it's very honest and authentic to be able to share that discussion, even with your husband of like, what am I going to do next? Like, what do you think makes sense? What's the next direction? Even when I founded AEJ Group originally, I had no idea what she was even going to be. I just was like, I'll just get started and figure out how to build a business all together. And it was working closely, talking to my husband, talking to my family, talking to other folks, then, having that board basically to sound things off on, I think is so helpful. And, I think that the drive that you have is so impressive. And I love a 0 security score. I wonder what mine would be. I don't think I'm cool enough to pull that off.
It was shocking. Like the coach was like, I've never seen anything like this.
I love it though.
She's like, I would tell corporate America, if you were applying at Kraft Foods, I would tell them not to hire you because you could do the job and you do it well, but it would suck your soul every day and you'd hate them for it and you'd eventually leave.
Yeah, that was
And
me.
it
I
sounds
hate
like
it.
you.
That was my life. I was working all around the clock. Well, and especially like COVID was so obviously so terrible in so many ways, but for members of Congress, they had to shift everything to virtual. And when you're covering the entire country, you're starting, at 8 a.m., but then, you're still covering Hawaii, 11 hours later. And so it was just like getting ready for like these events at, starting in the middle of the night or writing, copy for folks. And so it definitely though, I've always just kind of been a hustler and grinding it out. And I think that work ethic is really what helped me though with really being able to scale AEJ Group now to where we are and have the presence on Capitol Hill that we do. But it's been such a unique journey to kind of experience from 2020 to present,
COVID definitely was a disruptor and a lot of people didn't do well with it, but for those of us who wanted to make changes, it was pretty instrumental.
Totally, totally. I think it was like a very like eye-opening moment of like a WTF moment of like, what am I doing right now? This is not making me happy. I feel unfulfilled. I mean, my biggest thing honestly was I hated the person I was becoming at work. I was so mean, which is like so far from like who I was, just like so short and so tense and stressed and focused on stuff that it's like you take a step back and you're like, none of this doesn't matter. This doesn't make me happy. This isn't moving the needle forward. I'm not having a good time. I hate who I'm becoming. So I got to get out of here. And for me, I'm weird because I had been with the same company. I had been with Lockheed, which then was acquired or then switched to Leidos. But I'd been there. That was my very first job out of college in 2010. So I had never done any other job in my whole. I had started off as a contracting officer, which is comical, and then moved really quickly into sales and had been doing that my whole career, my whole adult career. And so taking that step and being like, I'm out, like was really the hardest decision because I was so comfortable in that routine of corporate life, but also so miserable at the same time. You just like have to break the cycle. And I'm glad I finally had the not so balls to do it.
Love that. All right. So let's move to our next topic. So this is about creating your personal brand. And so, do you mind if I take this one?
No, please. I love it.
Awesome. All right. So, when I thought about creating my personal brand, so thinking that I was going to be pressing, refresh on my inbox, I was like, how are people going to know about me? And I realized that you have to approach your personal brand the way you would approach any other brand. And so I learned branding the P&G way. So Procter and Gamble, and I pulled out my template and I said, okay, I'm going to do a brand strategy on myself. And I will tell you, that is the hardest thing I have ever done. I do brand strategies for my clients all the time, and I can whip them out like you wouldn't believe. But when you do it on yourself, it's really difficult to look at who you are. And I also believe that brand strategy shouldn't be done in a vacuum because you're only looking at one perspective. So I actually brought a couple of other people into the process with me because there's a ton of blind spots I don't see about myself. And there's also a ton of attributes that I might have that I can't even identify, but people around me identify. And so the way I started out was I said, okay, who's my prime prospect? So anybody here play darts? Okay, when you play darts, where do you aim? The center, right? All right. We aim for the center of the bullseye. Well, it goes around for sure, but nobody's aiming for an outer ring.
I'm just pumped if it stays.
What?
So I said I'm just pumped if it stays.
Well, that's
Yeah.
That too. But we're
Just
all
hitting the
aiming
board's half the
for the
battle.
center. And so your prime prospect is that center of the bullseye. It is the customer most difficult to delight. If you capture them, you get everybody else. And so when I do brand strategy for people, sometimes, we were thinking about the millennial consumer for a while. And they'd be like, well, we don't want to forget about the baby boomer. And I'm like, I got it. But as a millennial, are millennials taking trend advice from their parents? Anybody here take trend advice from their parents? No. How many of your parents take trend advice from you? Ask you what the new things are, what's hot, what they should be doing. Anybody? Yeah, a few? Okay. And so I would always say the millennial is your prime prospect. The baby boomer is in an outer ring. If you capture the millennial, you get the baby boomer. But if you go for the baby boomer, you miss the millennial. And that might be your biggest market. And so I identified who my prime prospects were. Who am I going to target? What industries was I going to target? Who at those companies did I need to be speaking to? And I build them out. I have, Sarah, the founder and CEO of a cannabis operator, and I build Sarah out and I look at every part of the archetype and I know who she is, what she's worried about, what she thinks about on a daily basis, what her problems are, and I build that persona out. I have a secondary and a tertiary archetype, and that is those are my prime prospects. I move from there into a brand pyramid. So the brand pyramid starts at the bottom with your points of parity. How am I like other businesses? Like, how am I like you? We're both, female entrepreneurs. We both have companies. We both started on our own and we both scaled. Nothing particularly unique about that, although both very good stories.
Yes.
And then I move up to my points of difference. How am I different? So how am I different from Ashley? Ashley's on the political side. I work in other highly regulated industries. So that's how I'm different. I work in highly regulated industries. I have an expertise in cannabis and psychedelics. I've run plant touching operations. I also have a CPG background, so I have really strong data. I had to identify all those points of difference that made me unique. Then I moved up and created my brand promise, what I was telling my clients every time they worked with me, what I was promising them. Then I moved up to my customer response. So, what kind of response did I want from them? From my brand promise, from my points of differentiation, and then up to my brand essence. That is how I wanted people to feel when they interacted with me. As I said earlier in my talk today, people don't remember what you say, but they do remember how you make them feel. And so that to me is the most important part of your brand. And then I moved into my brand guardrails. And I love the brand guardrails discussion. And we were talking about it earlier today. Brand guardrails are what you're going to be and what you're not going to be. So I'm going to be a marketing consultant. I am not going to be a political consultant. And so it's really important that you define your guardrails, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of shiny objects that fly at you as an entrepreneur, and it's easy to get caught up in things. How many people have seen a consultant out there who says, I'm an operations consultant, and then all of a sudden, now they're a real estate agent, and they're doing recruiting consulting? Anybody seen that?
Yes.
Do you know what that tells me? You're not very good at what you do. Because if you were good at what you do, you would stick with the operations consulting. It tells me you're not making any money doing that you're not successful in it, and you're trying to be everything to everybody. When I started my company, I'm like, I do more than marketing. I can be commercial strategy and execution.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew what that meant. The second I said I was a fractional marketer, people are like, I got it. That makes sense to me. And so it's very important to define your guardrails. Doesn't mean you don't evolve them. But when something comes at you and it's not within your guardrails, then the question you have to ask is, has something changed? Do I want to evolve the brand? And if the answer is no, then you might walk away from that opportunity. If the answer is yes, then you can consider it. And so, Ashley, I want to kind of bring you into this conversation too, because we were talking about this earlier. You work on Capitol Hill.
Yes.
And so you work Democratic side.
Yes.
And so every couple years, the House and Senate shift. So they might maintain leadership on the Democratic side, but they might move to the Republican side. And so how do you
Yeah.
deal with that?
Well, I think, it is really interesting. Obviously, in the House, you're up for reelection every 2 years. So, like, the second you get elected, you're also back to campaigning. But the fact of the matter is, my clients are constantly coming in and out. And if I am not, staying true to what we're trying to accomplish, the first time I sit down with a client, I explain to them that my goal is for us to be here in 2 more years, planning out the next 2 years strategy to help you get reelected. And I think, I've had to see a very variety of political shifts since 2010 on Capitol Hill, but staying true, in this branding moment to working, with Democrats, while I can work with the full spectrum of Democrats, whether it's more moderate or more progressive, we've had to stay kind of true to who we are and feel like we're not going to, work with Republicans or something like that. Not that that's bad. I did that in my old job, but we're definitely a very Democrat forward company, and it's also been able to help us as different seats move around to also expand into the campaign side as well. And so it's been an opportunity where you're learning to shift, but stay within your guardrails of what you've promised yourself and your brand. And I think that the customer, the clients, really respect the fact that you've got that level of integrity. Like, I would definitely lose clients if I started working on the other side.
So I like that because it's very, like, your space is very black and white.
Right.
It's Republican, Democrat, Independent, but independents don't generally have a lot of
Exist.
people like you.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to say, okay, we've now shifted to Republican. Okay, I'm going to jump over to the Republican side because that's where the business is, except for that it dilutes your brand.
Totally.
And the second it shifts back to the Democratic side, you look wishy-washy.
Totally.
And then you don't get the Democrats to rehire you because you're taking a short-term perspective.
Well, yeah, completely. And, being in charge of helping to drive their messaging and everything, it would be a little bit wonky if I pivoted from being diehard pro-choice to, writing something super controversial about pro-life or things like that. So,
Right.
I've had to, I know what gang I'm hanging out with.
Exactly. And I think that's really important. And so it's adhering to your guardrails, but also realizing that there are times where you need to evolve them, but you don't want to completely go off of your brand strategy. So then you move from there to your brand architecture, which is how it all comes together, and then mission, vision, core values, and brand voice. You get all that foundational work done, then everything else flows from there. And so once you have that foundation, then you can activate your brand. So let's talk about activating the brand.
Sure.
So you have your brand strategy, you know who your prime prospect is, you know your points of differentiation, your essence, your guardrails, all of that. How do you activate it? What levers are you going to pull? Digital, social,
And in what order,
and in what order? That's a really great point. And so how are you going to start building out the brand? How are you going to communicate that to your audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so many, it's so easy to look at all those options and be almost paralyzed by choice.
Mhm.
But, I think with me in particular, in the environment I work on, it's so relationship based of like, it's so much about who you know and what you're able to do. And so for me in particular, I think when I started really putting myself back out there, it was reaching out to past clients or groups that I had worked with that I had a really positive experience with and started to slowly, slow and steady, my little engine that could pick up another office here, another candidate over here. And that really was kind of, I would say, the biggest jumping off point was basically relationship based, but also just putting it back out on blast, having to, again, pull all those different levers of, making sure that you have such a presence on LinkedIn. That's where a lot of congressional staffers are using, that they're always moving different jobs, different offices. So LinkedIn was huge for me. Even my own personal social media, I think, was really helpful in just letting folks know that I was starting a new chapter, and getting their help and support, getting the word out there was definitely a benefit as well. What was your kind of jumping off point?
So same thing. So as I said, I wasn't sure how I was going to get my name out there. And one of the things I said earlier today, and I was a little challenged on it, is it takes about 18 months to build a brand. And I still kind of hold to that because you really have to develop that foundation, get everything going before you can move down that funnel. And so for me, I was like, how am I going to do this? And I started getting out into the community. So, like you, for me it's all relationship based too, because I'm dealing with small to mid-sized businesses. I'm dealing in very nascent industries. I'm dealing with people who only want to deal with people within the space. And so I started going to every event that I could, and I took pictures of myself with other people. I started posting those on social media. I started speaking at these events. I started posting that on social media. LinkedIn is your best friend when you're building your personal brand. So I'd say Instagram and Facebook are great when you're building a product brand, but for the most part, if you're trying to build a business, LinkedIn is the best. And I don't use LKP Impact Consulting's LinkedIn very much. I tag them, but LinkedIn actually prioritizes your personal profile over the business profile. And so everything I do through my personal profile. I try not to reshare as much as I can, because sometimes resharing doesn't get you the same kind of audience. And I started making sure that I was posting on LinkedIn 2 to 3 times a week. I was tagging as many people in the industry as I could. I was going through LinkedIn all the time and trying to connect with as many industry people. And I started showing up at all of the big conferences. And then people started to get to know me and get to know my brand. Additionally, I decided that I had to package myself. And so this is a package.
It's a good
Ev-
package.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I
you look
really
good.
appreciate
No
that. I like
problem.
yours too.
I know.
But the red hair is intentional. So when we think about packaging a product brand, it's all about the packaging on the shelf. You have 20 seconds to capture a consumer's attention at shelf. I have the same amount. And so the red hair, the nails, the jacket, I always look the same. And I do that for a reason. It is branding. I want people to be able to identify me. When I'm in a room and someone's like, I can't find you, I'm like, then you're not in the same room, because you cannot miss my hair. So that's all about packaging myself. And I utilized that to build up my brand. And I activated that on social media, digital, email marketing, newsletters, all of those kinds of things to get my name out there.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think that that's so beneficial. And you said earlier, which I thought was interesting, is identifying your market of exactly who you want to get in front of. And it's such a contrast to the market that I operate in, because there's only 435 members of Congress, and then you're cutting them
Mhm.
essentially in half, and they're all in 3 buildings in Washington D.C. that are all connected. That's such a defined, it's in, 1 square block. I can have my entire target audience, whereas yours can be all over the country.
Can be.
And that's incredible. I mean, and the power of LinkedIn to be able to identify and connect with those folks, I think, is extremely powerful and helpful, especially when getting started.
I would agree. And so I tell everybody in this audience, LinkedIn is your friend. Use it correctly. Make sure that you're putting content out there that is meaningful. Don't ramble. And my biggest advice is don't be negative. When I deal with my clients on LinkedIn, I have one client that likes to get on LinkedIn and rant about payment terms and rant about multi-state operators and how slow they are. And I'm like, you know what? Let's not talk about the negative. Let's reframe that to the positive. Nobody wants to hear the rant. People want to hear positivity. You can be positive and still get your point across. And so it's really important that you're well crafted when you use LinkedIn. And we've been talking a lot about ChatGPT, which I have to say, huge help for me.
Huge help. Yep.
But you have to be very careful about how you use it. It's a great thought starter, and sometimes I use it to write my LinkedIn posts, but then I edit it down, because some of the words you use, like gratitude or I'm eternally grateful, like that doesn't sound like me. And nobody talks like that, really. I mean, maybe there are some people who do, but it's definitely not me.
I'm definitely going to say eternally grateful at some point today, just to catch you.
Okay. So you have to edit it down. You have to make sure it's in your voice. It has to sound like you. but it's a great way to at least get the post started and make sure that you're punctuating it properly. I love it for grammar. But be authentic on LinkedIn, be yourself, but do it in a thoughtful, mindful, and positive way.
Totally. I agree. I mean, I think the authenticity behind, I've obviously stalked your LinkedIn and because I'm a creep. And, but I was like so blown away. I was like, I feel like I've learned so much just honestly from our short time together and the couple of chats that we've had. Lori is an amazing asset. Like, I want her to do my brand pyramid. Like, we could do that live
Oh my
for you
God, I
guys.
totally want
I
to.
know. I'm like ready. I'm like, sure. Because, the one thing that I've always been true to is being very authentic about who I am. Obviously, you guys can tell it's a very much a what you see is what you get. That's what I bring to my clients. That's why they're hiring me. I'm not going to BS them about what I think they should or shouldn't do. I'll tell them what's working, what's not working, what other offices are doing, that it's performing. But I think the authenticity to it and keeping that consistent throughout all of your messaging makes for people to feel confident and, reliable on your brand and who you are and what you're bringing to the table.
Well, thank you.
I'm eternally grateful.
Oh, thank you. That means so much. Well, I'm in awe of everything you've done as well. It is not easy working with members of Congress,
LOL.
but you have great stories, I'm sure.
I do, but
All right, so let's move to our next topic, which is imposter syndrome. And I thought imposter syndrome was something only like women felt or women and minorities felt, but I have learned in my time that everybody gets imposter syndrome at some point. I mean, I guess not everybody, that would be extreme. But even talking to my husband and other men that I work with who I think have it all together, we all end up with imposter syndrome. And when you own your own business and you're building your personal brand, imposter syndrome is a real thing.
so real.
So,
Totally.
Ashley, how do you approach imposter syndrome? How do you deal with it?
I mean, I think originally I was like, why me? Like, why are these people actually choosing to work with me? Like, I was questioning myself so much and also trying to juggle the balance of having a new business, a new baby, trying to stay married, trying to, also remember to order groceries and like do all the other things that you're expected to do. And at the same time, working with such incredible members of Congress and writing with them their messaging that, hundreds of thousands of people are going to see. I was like, who am I? Like, what am I doing here? Like, when are people going to realize, like, what's going on? But I think, what helped me a lot was the fact that, I mentioned earlier, like, I stay very authentic to who I am and try to trust my gut and, realize that what I'm delivering for folks is working. I wouldn't continue to pick up new clients if it wasn't. Every project, none of my clients sign like long-term contracts. Everything is on a project by project basis, and I feel like they should want to work with me again, not feel stuck to work with me again. And I think that repeat business has kind of helped validate, that these different projects that I'm putting out, whether it's a text blast, I'm sorry, you've gotten political texts before, you can blame. I know they're the worst.
We can blame Ashley.
Don't actually blame me. Only if it's on the official side. Just reply stop. But whether you're putting together a text message or a Facebook ad campaign or CTV, or I'm getting together like a print mailer or any of the other ways that people are connecting and communicating with their local officials. You have to just stay authentic to who you are, and I think try to realize that if people are still buying it from you, you must be doing something right.
Ladies, we have time for a couple questions.
All right.
Okay.
Questions from the audience.
I was ready for your if we get no questions, we'll do Lori's imposter syndrome.
Do you want to hear mine?
Yeah.
Okay.
She probably has a way better answer.
I will say I definitely have imposter syndrome. There's nights I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, who's letting me do this? Like, why is anybody letting me do this? So when I was a child, I thought my parents had all the answers. Anybody else think their parents had all the answers? Yeah. And it's not that they did anything or said anything. We just assumed they knew everything. And so I assumed when I became an adult, I would get wisdom. Who here got wisdom? No, none of us. And so I realized as an adult, we're all just winging it. Like, even to my children, I say, like, my daughter will get upset with me, and I'm like, look, I'm learning too.
I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah,
We're rolling with it.
yeah, I'm learning too. I don't have all the answers. Back in my parents' day, they didn't say that. Now we're more open to that dialogue. And so I get here and I'm like, I assumed that when I became, a midlife professional and an executive, I would know all the answers, and I don't. And so sometimes that gives me imposter syndrome. But the way I approach it is imposter syndrome can be a good or a bad thing. If it motivates you to be better and it pushes you to be your best self, it can be good. If it locks you up, that's a problem. And so I try to use it to motivate me to be better and better. So that's how I deal with it.
That was a much better answer, obviously.
No, it's not.
She's
Your
got her
answer was
whole
fabulous.
pyramid. She's got her pyramid. She's got her imposter syndrome. I'm just over here trying not to drop F-bombs and,
Oh my God, you have no idea how many F-bombs I throw out there.
same. It's my favorite word.
That being said, does anybody have any effing questions for the lady?
That was perfect. Thank you.
All right, I got a couple questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate y'all talking about impostership syndrome. Is that what you call it? Imposter syndrome?
Correct.
Okay. I'm a perfectionist, and I think that because I've realized that I don't know everything, that sometimes it creates, I guess, that stifle, or just, you get a little bit frozen. So, how did you all get past having those moments of the imposter syndrome? Or is it just that I've got to show myself more grace and not knowing everything?
It's a great question. I
Oh.
mean, one, I'm always team self grace. So the more gentle you can be to yourself, the better. But I really think it's kind of just one foot in front of another, knowing that you're going through the right steps and executing the things that you can control. For me, like whenever I would be, same. I would get very anxious when I would be like, I've got all these things to do. I want to do them all perfectly. I don't want to mess up. I don't want to let people down. But the fact of the matter is, you just take that day or that task and you just continue to break it into smaller, more manageable things. Like, I would be like, okay, this day is too hard. I'm going to focus on the next 4 hours, or I'm going to focus on the next hour, or I'm going to focus on the next 15 minutes or 15 seconds and just breathe. Like you can get paralyzed kind of with that anxiety. And for me in particular, like I can spiral so fast of like,
Yeah.
oh my God, and then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. And then my company's going to blow up, and then
Yeah,
I'm
because you feel you're responsible. So then you feel like if something goes wrong, then everything's your fault. Then.
yeah, I mean it's my name on the company, so
Yeah.
definitely.
I would say you have to be comfortable with the unknown. You can't possibly know everything about everything. Nobody does.
Security zero.
Yeah. And yes, I am security zero. You have to become comfortable in the unknown, and you learn as you go. We are all amalgamations of our experiences. And so your experiences are what define you, and you can't possibly have had every experience in the world. Where none of us live that long. So you have to be okay with the unknown and build your community. Build other experts around you that you can go to, that you can ask questions that you think are stupid, and that they will give you the answer without any judgment. And that will help kind of get you through things. I can tell you all the time, I come up against something and I'm like, I don't know how to deal with this. And I call another marketer and I'm like, hey, have you ever dealt with this before? Can you give me a little bit of advice on how you would approach it? And they do. We have to all help each other. If we don't help each other, then we don't rise. And we all need to rise together. Because at the end of the day, that's our profession, that's what we do. And if we don't help each other, then nobody gets any better.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, for sure.
And that's our time, ladies. Thank you very much for joining us
Thank
today.
you, everybody.
Give it up for our last two speakers of the morning.